Hello, my name is Katie and welcome to my video. I decided that I needed to do a mid-month wrap-up for October because if I don't, I'm pretty sure my wrap-up for the month is going to be like an hour long and I don't want to edit that and I probably wouldn't watch something that long. So we're going to split it up. The first 3 books I'm going to mention that I read this month, I'm not going to talk at length about because I've already discussed them in other videos. The first is Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. I gave this 4 stars. The second was Blood Heir by Amelie and Zhao. I gave this 3 stars. Both of those are in my Femme Fatale wrap-up video, which I will link in the description box or in the cards or whatever I remember to do. The other book that I read and also I have a standalone review for actually is Catherine House by Elisabeth Thomas. I gave this 5 stars, which is a bit of a controversial rating for this book if you look at the Goodreads page. So if you're curious, I will also link that video. Next, we'll go to the book I DNFed this month, and it's a bit of a doozy. I DNFed The Diviners by Libba Bray. I know, a lot of people love this book, and I really thought I was going to because Evie O'Neill's funny, but she's also kind of a brat. And so that was annoying, but I could have gotten past that. What I couldn't get past, and this is like a personal to me issue, not really an issue with the book, was that the murders that were happening in the book, because this is like part murder mystery, really took on a dark religious kind of vibe, and that stuff freaks me out. So I didn't manage to finish this, which is really sad because it takes place in like 1920s New York and there's like paranormal things happening, which would have been really cool and I really would have enjoyed it had it not been that it took a religious turn. Then I went on a thriller binge, which is appropriate for October, I think. The first book I read was One by One by Ruth Ware. I really like Ruth Ware, however, I liked this book the least. I thought I was going to like it more because it's got like an isolationist vibe to it. We're following this group of people. They all work at this like a tech startup company. They created this app and they're going on like a corporate retreat. This corporate retreat is way up in the mountains in France. Upon arrival, things quickly start going wrong. Like the day after they get there, an avalanche happens and they are stuck. They are stuck in this like cabin on the side of a mountain, which is terrifying. My issue with this was that starting at like within the first couple chapters, I was like, oh, it's probably going to be this person that did it. Nothing had even happened yet. And I was already like thinking it was going to be this person. But then I backtracked and I was like, no, that'd be way too obvious. There's no way that can be the case. Unfortunately, it was the case. And that was disappointing. So I will continue to read Ruth Ware just because so far I've liked every other book by her. But this was just not her strongest. If you like the idea of a thriller set in the middle of nowhere during the winter, I would say The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley is a little bit better than this. Next, I read The Wife by Alafair Burke. This was an interesting read. I believe I gave it 3 stars, but I feel as though I probably could have raised that a little bit had things gone slightly differently. What I will say for this book is that the ending did kind of throw me for a loop. We are following a woman and her husband is accused of acting inappropriately with an intern. Upon the heels of that, he is accused of rape by a business associate. Our main character's name is Angela and her husband is fairly well known. He wrote a book that hit the New York Times bestsellers list. He has a pretty popular podcast. So it was a fairly big deal when these allegations came out. Angela in this book is struggling with how to handle this because obviously she wants to believe the best of her husband, and she doesn't really want him to get into trouble. But I think there's a part of her that knows that these accusations could, in fact, be true. So she's struggling with that. There's a lot going on in this book because Angela has a secret of her own, which I can't talk about because I do think that would be spoiler territory. But this wasn't bad. For me, it was just kind of like an average thriller. There wasn't anything that completely blew my mind or that I thought warranted more than about an average rating. But if you are interested in like domestic type thrillers, this isn't a bad one. I then finished Bring Me Back by B.A. Paris. I don't think I actually rated this, and I still don't know what I would rate it because there's a part of me that was like, whoa. And then there was a part of me that was like, but really though? Anyway, we're following this man, and something like 14, 15 years ago, his girlfriend disappears at like a rest area. And he talks to the police. Nothing is ever found. Like, no body's ever found. She never turns up. Nothing. So all these years later, he has moved on and settled down with another woman. And he starts hearing from the girlfriend who is now presumed to be dead. And things kind of just go from there. Oh, this one got a little bit psychological and like fairly twisty, and my main issue though was that I felt like our main character was dumb. Like some of the things he said and the reaches he would make, I couldn't understand where he was getting these things. So that bothered me, but otherwise not a bad read. I really don't even think I could put a rating on it though, because I honestly don't know how I feel. What I do know is that I'm interested in reading more books from B.A. Paris. I next finished The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. This was good. I really wasn't disappointed with it. I rate this about a 4.5 because I think the issues I had were minor, and I think they might have just been like a me thing. I don't know if other people would necessarily have the problem that I had with it. A bit of a summary. Our main character, Nari, is performing this ritual. She is a con woman who lives in Cairo, and she's like really close to living on the streets. Like, she's barely keeping it together. During this ritual, she inadvertently summons a Jinn warrior, and then a lot of chaos happens. So this Jinn warrior, in order to protect her from various other things that happened when she awoke him, takes her to the city of the Jinn. It's called DNFed, because that's the only place he thinks she'll be safe. Oh my. So much adventure. And such beautiful world building. I don't know if I've ever really read a book quite like this that's based on Middle Eastern folklore and religion. At least not one that it was so very apparent that that's what it was based off of. And this was done so beautifully. This book is told in dual perspectives. Our other perspective is from Ali. He's a Jinn who lives in DNFed. And his chapters, I honestly didn't really care for. I found them to be a little bit, I wouldn't say boring, they were just slower paced. Because his are highly political, whereas Nari's chapters were a little bit more on the adventurous side. It wasn't until their two storylines meet that I really started enjoying Ali's chapters. And then my other issue with the book was that I was struggling to figure out the various Jinn tribes that were being talked about. I felt very confused for a lot of the book. And that kind of, it was just confusing. It was confusing, and it was hard to maintain what the storyline was, and it was hard to figure out who was on whose side. The glossary at the end helped a little bit with that, but I think in the beginning of the book, if we had had kind of a breakdown of the different tribes and where our main characters fit into those tribes, I think it would have been a lot easier to track. The final book I read in the first half of October was Empty Mansions, The Mysterious Life of Huguette Clark, and the Spending of a Great American Fortune by Bill Dedman and Paul Clark Newell Jr. This book I rated about 3.5 stars. It was a really interesting story, and it was about a family I had never heard of. The title character, Huguette Clark, her father made a fortune in copper mining, among other things. He was also a senator for a while, which is cool, but you never really hear them talked about. This book, though, it was mainly the writing that kept me from rating it higher. I felt like the timeline jumped around all over the place. You begin with following Huguette's father and learning about how he amassed his wealth, but even within those sections, you're jumping around through different years, and it's really hard to keep track of where we're at in the story, who he's married to, what kids exist. All of that it was just hard to pinpoint where we were at in this man's life at any given moment. Another thing that I thought was weird was there were things that were just glossed over and not even really talked about that I feel like should have had more attention paid. For example, Huguette, who this book is ostensibly about, there isn't even really a section in which they talk about when she was born, which I thought was really weird. So I was just kind of like left guessing, like, oh, she exists now? Cool. The other thing about the writing that bothered me was there were times when it felt like there were commas thrown in sentences that didn't need to be there. And a lot of times they would take the place of actual words that should have been there in order to make it clear what the sentence was saying. And it was something that really yanked me out of the story because I had to keep going back and rereading the sentence because I thought maybe just I was crazy. But no, the writing was just not that great. Also, something to note is that the title says that this is about the mysterious life of Huguette Clark and the spending of a great American fortune. And it is, but not until like the last half, which is fine. I think if they hadn't included all the background about how she obtained this great wealth, we probably would have been a little bit confused. But it's just odd because that didn't actually seem like the main focus of the story at all. Overall, this book was good though. Huguette was actually quite the philanthropist, but not in a big showy way. She wanted all her donations to things to be kept anonymous. If there were people who worked for her or craftsmen that she loved and admired, even a lot of times just family friends, she would just support them. And then even after her like main point of contact with the family, even if they passed away, she would continue to support their family too, which I thought was just incredible because I don't know of many people who would do that. Something that made me sick though was how people would take advantage of her, especially once she was in her older years. Once she was in about her 80s, she moved into a hospital permanently. She had several residences. She had 3 apartments in New York, a house in California, a house in Connecticut, but she decided to live in this hospital. And it seems she did do better there than she was doing living on her own in the apartments in New York. But a lot of people took advantage of her vulnerability. And it made my stomach turn. There were a lot of things that made me uncomfortable, such as her main nurse, the amount of money Huguette would give her, and then it seemed almost like she kept asking for more, which really made me uncomfortable. However, from the nurse's point of view, because Huguette had taken such a liking to her, she was working 7 days a week, 12-hour shifts. So in a way, you can see it as Huguette paying her back for her dedication. But this woman had 7 houses, several luxury automobiles, and would pester Huguette's lawyer about the $5 million that Huguette had promised her as a gift. And I was like, you have 7 houses, several cars, you get paid for all your children to go to school, college, grad school, all of it. When you complained about what taxes were because of the money she gave you, she paid the taxes. So there was a lot in this book that I really did enjoy. Huguette lived an incredible life. She died 2 weeks before her 105th birthday. So she saw a lot. She saw a lot of world events in her lifetime. But I still think it's worth a read. However, because I didn't care for the way a lot of it was written, I didn't feel it rated more than about a 3.5 star. And that is it for the books that I've read in the first half of October. If you've read any of these books, let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you agree with my assessment? Do you disagree? Let's chat. If you would like to read any of these books now, let me know that as well. If you're new here and you like my content, subscribe. Stick around. I'd love to see you in my comments. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you soon.